Elias opened his eyes to darkness and silence. For a moment, he could not move, and the cold metal walls of the chamber felt strange and unfamiliar. His mind was clouded, heavy with confusion, as if he had been asleep for centuries. Slowly, memories began to return. The mission, the journey to the stars, and the promise to explore distant worlds that no human had ever seen. But everything after that was a blur. The spacecraft around him hummed quietly, a faint vibration that reminded him he was alive. He pushed himself up, every muscle stiff, and looked around. The chamber was empty, lit by dim, flickering lights. Panels blinked softly, their green glow casting shadows on the walls. He had been in cryogenic sleep, that much was clear. But for how long? The thought made him shiver. Elias moved to the control panel, pressing buttons that responded slowly to his touch. The screen flickered to life, displaying unreadable symbols and graphs. He tried to make sense of it, but the technology had aged beyond recognition. Everything felt ancient, yet somehow preserved, like a forgotten monument. Then a small message appeared in English, the universal language he had set for emergencies. The date blinked on the screen. He read it twice. 15,000 years had passed since the mission had begun. The number made him stumble back, gripping the wall for support. 15,000 years. His mind could not fully comprehend it. He had expected decades, perhaps a century at most, but millennia? That was impossible, and yet the machines confirmed it. Time had moved on without him. He opened the hatch and stepped into the main corridor. The air was thick with stillness, and every sound he made echoed strangely in the metal tunnels. Dust floated in the air, disturbed by the gentle movement of his steps. The spacecraft itself was enormous, built for exploration and survival. But now, it was a relic. Panels that once displayed critical mission information were dark, and many corridors were blocked by collapsed bulkheads. Elias felt a strange mix of awe and fear. He had traveled far beyond human history and returned to find everything familiar yet alien. He moved to the observation deck, peering through the thick glass at the planet below. It was beautiful and strange. Vast oceans sparkled in the sunlight. Massive cities glowed with artificial lights, and towers reached into the clouds like fingers of steel and glass. Flying vehicles zipped between the buildings, leaving bright trails behind them. But something was wrong. The planet, alive with movement, showed no sign of human presence. There were no human flags, no signs of colonies, no ships like his. He had expected to return to a world advanced by centuries, not one completely transformed by alien hands. The thought pressed heavily on his chest. As he studied the planet, his sensors picked up movement. Small drones flew around the cities below, scanning and communicating in a language he did not understand. Shadows moved along the edges of the urban landscapes, shapes that looked humanoid, but were unmistakably not human. Elias realized with a mixture of fear and curiosity that he was not welcome. The inhabitants of this world were advanced and vigilant, and his arrival was something new, unknown, and likely unwelcome. He had to be careful. Elias decided to descend to the planet to learn more. He prepared the shuttle, checking systems that groaned under the weight of time. The engines hummed to life with difficulty, but after long minutes, they responded. As the shuttle rose into the atmosphere, he looked back at the ship that had been his home for centuries. The thought of leaving it behind was strange. It had been his world in stasis, his constant in the endless flow of time. Yet now, the real world awaited, and it had changed beyond recognition. The descent was smooth, but as the shuttle approached the city, alarms began to flash. The drones he had seen earlier began to converge, small lights blinking as they surrounded him. Elias tried to communicate using universal signals, but the drones ignored him, buzzing closer with precision and coordination. It was a warning, clear and undeniable. The world below did not recognize him as a friend. He landed in a clearing at the edge of the city. The shuttle's doors opened and the alien air of the planet rushed in. It smelled metallic, with hints of vegetation he could not name. The ground beneath his feet was smooth, almost artificial, yet it had the organic feel of life. He stepped out, trying to show no threat, raising his hands slowly and keeping his posture calm. The drones circled him, scanning and recording. From the shadows of the city, figures emerged, tall, slender humanoid beings with greenish skin and large, expressive eyes. They moved silently, watching him with caution. Elias took a deep breath and spoke. "I am Elias, a human from the distant past. I come in peace." His voice sounded strange to him, carried by a throat that had not spoken in centuries. The beings did not respond. Their eyes glowed faintly as if communicating silently. Elias realized that they had a system of communication that did not rely on sound. He tried again, this time raising his hands and projecting calm gestures. It was a universal language he had studied long ago, meant to show peace and intelligence. Still, they did not advance. Days passed as he explored the outskirts of the city, careful not to provoke the inhabitants. He observed their technology from a distance. Buildings that moved and reconfigured themselves, vehicles that floated without engines, machines that healed injuries and repaired structures with light and energy. The world was beautiful, advanced beyond anything he had imagined, yet the people of this planet feared him. Every interaction was cautious. He noticed that even the children stayed away, and adults communicated in hushed tones, pointing in his direction with expressions of concern. The fear was palpable. Elias realized that humanity had left an impression even after 15,000 years. The stories of humans traveling among the stars, of our ambition and courage, had survived. But they had been distorted into myths, warnings, and legends. Humans had once been seen as powerful and unpredictable, capable of great creativity and equally great destruction. To these people, Elias was a living symbol of that unknown threat. He knew that proving himself would not be easy. The aliens were intelligent, cautious, and advanced. They could have destroyed him with a gesture, yet they hesitated. That hesitation was his opportunity. He needed to show them that humans were not just relics of the past or legends of fear. They could be allies, creators, problem solvers. Elias began searching for ways to help, small ways at first. He fixed broken machinery using human intuition and ingenuity, repaired energy conduits that were failing, and solved minor technical problems that the aliens had overlooked. Each time, he saw curiosity replace fear in the eyes of those who observed him. One day, a disaster struck. A massive energy surge threatened the entire district of the city. The power grids were failing, and the floating transport vehicles were at risk of crashing. Elias watched from a distance as the inhabitants panicked, unsure of how to respond. He realized that this was his chance to demonstrate what humans could do. With no hesitation, he ran toward the epicenter of the crisis, dodging falling debris and guiding the alien workers with gestures and commands. He connected circuits in a way that the aliens had not considered, redirecting energy flows and stabilizing the system. Slowly, the city returned to normal, the lights flickering back to life, and the transports resuming their paths. The inhabitants gathered around him, their expressions a mix of awe and disbelief. Elias, breathing heavily, looked at them and smiled. "I am not here to harm. I am here to help." The words were simple, yet they carried weight. For the first time, he saw a spark of trust, a glimmer of hope that his presence could be more than a legend of fear. As night fell, Elias stood atop a high platform overlooking the city. Lights shimmered below, reflecting off the clouds, painting a scene of beauty and complexity. He thought about the time he had lost, the centuries that had passed while he slept, and the world that had grown without him. Yet in this moment, he also saw possibility. Humans had once been feared, but humans could also inspire. His journey was just beginning. The inhabitants of this world would learn that humans were not only survivors, but creators, problem solvers, and courageous beings capable of making a difference even after 15,000 years. Elias felt the weight of history on his shoulders, but he also felt a sense of purpose, stronger than anything he had ever known. He had awakened to a world that feared him, but he would not be defined by that fear. He would show them the strength of humanity, the courage to face challenges, and the ability to inspire change. The night was quiet, but within it, the spark of a new story had begun. He did not know what the inhabitants would think tomorrow, or the next day, or in the weeks to come. But he knew one thing: humans could endure, humans could adapt, and humans could prove themselves worthy, no matter how much time had passed. And Elias was ready to begin that proof. Elias woke to the pale light of the planet's dawn spilling across the city. The glow from towering structures reflected in the clouds, giving the skyline a shimmer he had never seen before. The streets were alive with activity, yet there was a tension in the air he could feel even from his perch above. Yesterday's events had changed something, but not enough. The people still looked at him with suspicion, some hiding behind the safety of shadows, while others studied him from a distance. He understood that trust would not come easily, not in a world that had learned caution over millennia. He decided to move closer to the city's center, hoping to observe and learn more about the inhabitants, the Viridians, as he had begun to call them after glimpsing their records and symbols. They were tall and elegant, with smooth green skin and large eyes that reflected intelligence and curiosity. Their movements were precise, graceful, and purposeful. Despite their advanced technology, they seemed aware of every corner of their environment, as if every step and action had been considered in advance. Elias felt a mix of awe and humility. These beings were remarkable, and yet there was room for humans, for his creativity, for the spark of imagination that had always defined his species. As he walked through the city, he tried small gestures of friendliness. He helped repair a small transport vehicle that had broken down, using basic human tools and reasoning that the Viridians had not considered. They watched silently as he worked, whispering to each other in their melodic alien language. Slowly, some began to approach, curiosity overcoming fear. Children, the most fearless of all, crept closer, their eyes wide with wonder at the strange human who had suddenly appeared among them. Elias smiled and waved gently, careful not to startle them. For days he moved quietly among the city, offering assistance wherever he could. He repaired systems that had begun to fail, helped recalibrate machinery, and even found a way to clean and restore the city's energy conduits using a method he remembered from his human knowledge. Each small success changed the way the Viridians saw him. The fear that had once been so strong began to shift into a cautious respect. They had never seen anyone act without hesitation, with courage and intelligence that combined thought and action seamlessly. Humans, they began to realize, were more than legends. They were beings capable of creating solutions even in the face of danger. One day, while exploring the outskirts of the city, Elias discovered something unexpected. Hidden in a quiet corner, beneath the towering buildings and elaborate walkways, was a group of Viridians huddled around a complex device. It was unlike anything he had seen before, a network of glowing circuits and energy channels that pulsed with power. He watched from a distance, curious, and realized that the device had been malfunctioning. The group was struggling to repair it, but their approach seemed methodical, slow, and hesitant. Elias recognized the problem immediately. With careful steps he approached, raising his hands in a gesture of peace. "I can help," he said, his voice steady but calm. "Let me try." The Viridians looked at him with surprise, uncertainty flickering in their large eyes. Slowly, one of them nodded. Elias bent over the device, examining the circuits and energy flows. Using his understanding of physics and logic, he suggested changes that they had not considered. With careful hands, he adjusted the conduits, realigned energy channels, and restored the device to full functionality. The group watched in awe as the machine hummed to life, glowing brighter and more stable than before. For the first time, the Viridians touched him, lightly. Not in fear, but in gratitude. Small gestures, hands brushing against his arms, nods of acknowledgement, and the faintest smiles broke through the barrier of suspicion. Elias felt a surge of hope. He was not just surviving, he was beginning to change their perception of humans, showing them that his species could be a force for good, intelligence, and creativity. But not all Viridians were pleased with his presence. As Elias explored deeper into the city, he began to notice subtle signs of resistance. Certain groups avoided him entirely, whispering and gesturing in secret. Some systems, which he had repaired earlier, were sabotaged shortly after he left. It became clear that fear and control still ruled many hearts. Humans, they seemed to believe, were unpredictable. Even one human could upset the delicate balance of power in ways they did not understand. Elias realized that winning the trust of this world would not be simple. Respect could be earned only through consistent action, courage, and patience. He decided to focus on problems the Viridians could not solve themselves. One of these was the city's energy grid. While it appeared flawless, Elias noticed small fluctuations in the system, patterns of instability that could, if left unchecked, lead to widespread failures. Using his human intuition, he traced the cause to a design flaw that the Viridians had never considered a problem. It was a subtle error, one that could only be detected by someone willing to think differently, someone who approached the world without the assumptions built over thousands of years of culture. Working carefully, Elias adjusted the flow, creating a stabilizing network that allowed energy to move more efficiently. The system responded immediately, becoming smoother and more reliable than ever before. Viridians who had once feared him now observed with a mixture of wonder and disbelief. Here was a being from another time, another world, whose approach had solved a problem their advanced technology could not. Humans, they began to whisper, were not just capable, they were extraordinary. As days turned into weeks, Elias became a familiar presence in the city. People still watched him, but the fear had lessened, replaced with curiosity and a cautious willingness to learn. He began teaching them some of his own methods, ways to combine logic, intuition, and creativity to solve problems. Slowly, he saw the spark of collaboration grow. Where once he had been an outsider, he was now a contributor. Then disaster struck. A massive storm formed over the city, unlike anything Elias had ever seen. Winds tore through the streets, vehicles were tossed aside, and energy conduits risked catastrophic failure. The Viridians panicked, unsure how to respond to such a natural threat. Elias understood immediately that their technology, while advanced, relied heavily on controlled conditions. Chaos, unpredictability, and raw environmental forces were vulnerabilities they had not experienced. Elias sprang into action. He directed the people, helping them secure structures, stabilize floating vehicles, and protect vulnerable systems. He worked tirelessly, combining human ingenuity with his understanding of physics and engineering. When a large energy conduit began to overload, he calculated the best way to redirect the flow, creating a temporary network that prevented a massive explosion. His actions saved countless lives and preserved the city's infrastructure. When the storm finally passed, the Viridians gathered around him. Their eyes, once filled with suspicion, now reflected awe and gratitude. The children ran to him, laughing and smiling, while adults nodded in respect. He realized that this was the turning point. They had seen not just his intelligence, but his courage, his willingness to act in the face of danger, and his ability to think quickly under pressure. Humans, they understood, were beings of action and creativity, capable of rising above fear and chaos. Even so, Elias knew the journey was far from over. The factions that still distrusted him would not give up easily. Some had begun to spread rumors, claiming that humans brought danger and disruption wherever they went. Others watched silently, calculating whether his presence threatened their power. Elias understood that he would need more than cleverness and bravery. He would need patience, understanding, and the ability to inspire trust over time. One evening, he found himself on a high platform overlooking the city. The lights shimmered below, reflecting the efforts of a population slowly learning to accept him. He thought of his own people, long gone, and wondered what humanity would be remembered for in the galaxy. Here, on this distant planet, he had the chance to show what humans could truly be: brave, intelligent, and compassionate. He realized that fear could be transformed, mistrust could become respect, and suspicion could grow into friendship. But it would take time. Elias spent the following days exploring more of the city and its surrounding regions. He learned about the culture, the history, and the values of the Viridians. He discovered that their fear of humans was not born out of ignorance, but from historical records that depicted humans as unpredictable wanderers, sometimes bringing destruction, sometimes offering aid. In their stories, humans were powerful, clever, and sometimes uncontrollable. Elias realized that the legends of his own species had reached far across the galaxy and had been interpreted through centuries of caution. He decided that his next step would be to prove humans' value not only through deeds, but through teaching. He began sharing small lessons, demonstrating ways to combine human ingenuity with Viridian technology to improve efficiency, communication, and problem-solving. Slowly, small groups of Viridians began to approach him willingly, eager to learn and collaborate. They asked questions, shared ideas, and tested solutions together. Elias felt hope growing within him. Trust, once a distant dream, was becoming reality. But the shadows of resistance remained. Elias noticed subtle acts of sabotage. Systems he had repaired disrupted overnight. Messages twisted to mislead the population, and whispers in the streets suggesting that humans could not be trusted. He knew that while the majority were beginning to accept him, a powerful minority still feared what a human could represent. The challenge ahead was clear: to overcome fear, to inspire respect, and to prove that humans could be allies, not threats. Elias looked up at the night sky, seeing stars that he had not seen in 15,000 years. The galaxy had moved on. Civilizations had grown and evolved, and yet humans, even one human, could still make a difference. He felt a renewed sense of purpose. Fear could be faced, trust could be earned, and legends could be reshaped. He would show the Viridians that humans were not merely survivors of the past. They were creators of the future, capable of courage, intelligence, and hope. And with that thought, he began planning his next steps. He would not just survive in this world. He would help it thrive, proving that humans were special, not because of their history or their technology, but because of their courage, creativity, and unwavering determination to make a difference. Elias had begun to feel a sense of belonging among the Viridians, yet he knew that not everyone welcomed him. Whispers of distrust had not disappeared, and he could sense a silent resistance forming among a small but influential group. They watched him with careful eyes, judging every word, every action, every gesture. To them, he was a stranger from a time long past, a human who could disrupt the carefully balanced order they had maintained for centuries. Elias understood that winning the trust of the people would require more than just good deeds. He would need to confront their fear directly and show the true value of humans. He spent days learning about the inner workings of the city's governance, studying the patterns of influence and power. The Viridians were intelligent, organized, and cautious, yet he noticed weaknesses, blind spots created by centuries of habit, overconfidence, and reliance on technology. Humans, he realized, could offer something unique: creativity, adaptability, and the ability to see beyond established patterns. With this understanding, Elias began to plan ways to help the city and its people in ways they had not considered. The first challenge came quickly. An unexpected system failure in the city's water supply caused panic. Water levels in certain districts were dropping rapidly, and the automated repair systems could not respond effectively. The Viridians struggled to coordinate a solution, their methods precise but slow. Elias observed from a distance, understanding the urgency. Without hesitation, he ran toward the affected area, his mind working quickly. Using his human intuition and understanding of hydraulics, he suggested a temporary rerouting of water through auxiliary conduits. He guided the workers step by step, combining his knowledge with their technology. Within hours, the crisis was resolved, and the water supply stabilized. The Viridians gathered around him, their expressions a mix of awe and disbelief. "How did you think of that?" one of them asked, eyes wide. Elias smiled. "Sometimes you have to look at the problem differently. You do not always need more technology. Sometimes you just need a different way to use what you already have." The words were simple, but the meaning was profound. Humans, he realized, could inspire not just action, but new ways of thinking. As the days passed, Elias began to gain a small following among the Viridians. These were not all leaders or officials, but ordinary citizens curious about the human who had arrived after so many millennia. They observed him solving problems, teaching techniques, and demonstrating courage in the face of danger. Slowly, respect replaced fear. Children ran to him with questions, and adults began to ask for guidance in their own projects. Elias felt a sense of hope he had not experienced since awakening. Yet the resistance remained. Elias began to notice subtle acts of sabotage, communications disrupted, minor systems damaged, and whispers in the streets warning of human influence. It became clear that a faction among the Viridians viewed him as a threat. They feared that if humans were accepted, the balance of power they had maintained for centuries would be disrupted. Elias realized that he would need to confront this faction directly, not with force, but with intelligence, courage, and the ability to prove humans were allies, not enemies. The opportunity came sooner than he expected. A neighboring district experienced a sudden and severe structural collapse in one of its main towers. The collapse trapped hundreds of Viridians inside, and the automated rescue systems failed to respond quickly. Panic spread, and the resistant faction argued that humans could not be trusted to intervene. Elias, however, saw a chance to demonstrate the value of human problem-solving. He moved quickly to the site, assessing the situation with a trained eye. He organized the rescue operation with precision, using a combination of human logic, improvisation, and knowledge of physics. He directed the Viridians to create makeshift supports, reroute energy, and carefully extract those trapped inside. Time was critical, and Elias worked tirelessly, coordinating the efforts and making rapid decisions under pressure. Slowly but surely, the victims were rescued, and the tower was stabilized. When the operation was complete, the Viridians looked at him with newfound respect. Even members of the resistant faction could not deny the results. Elias spoke calmly, addressing the gathered crowd. "Humans are not here to destroy or control. We act with courage and creativity. We solve problems, not create them. You can fear us, or you can learn from us." The words echoed through the district, and for the first time, many began to reconsider their preconceived notions. Despite this success, Elias knew the challenge was far from over. The resistant faction still lingered in the shadows, plotting subtle ways to undermine him. He began to study them carefully, learning their tactics and understanding their motivations. They were intelligent, cautious, and proud, but they underestimated the power of human adaptability. Elias realized that he would need to combine his knowledge, courage, and the growing trust of the people to overcome this silent threat. In the following weeks, he continued to work among the Viridians, building small networks of collaboration. He introduced techniques that combined human creativity with Viridian technology, allowing for more efficient energy use, improved communication systems, and better disaster management. Each success further demonstrated the value of humans, gradually shifting public opinion. Children, workers, and even some officials began to advocate for him, creating a ripple effect that weakened the influence of the resistant faction. Then a new challenge emerged. An unknown force, perhaps a natural phenomenon, or a malfunction in the planetary systems, began to threaten the city on a larger scale. Energy surges caused malfunctions in the transport networks, floating vehicles began to fail, and critical systems experienced unexplained instability. Panic gripped the population, and the resistant faction saw this as an opportunity to discredit Elias. They argued that humans were unpredictable and dangerous, that his presence had invited disaster. Elias knew he had to act quickly to prove the opposite. He moved to the central hub of the city, where the main energy systems were located. The problems were complex, far beyond anything the Viridians had encountered. Yet Elias approached them with a calm mind and focused determination. He analyzed the patterns, identified weak points, and began to implement solutions using both his understanding of physics and creative problem-solving. He coordinated teams of Viridians, assigning tasks based on his observations of their strengths and abilities. Hours passed as Elias worked tirelessly, correcting errors, stabilizing energy flows, and ensuring that the systems would not fail again. The resistant faction watched, initially skeptical, then slowly realizing that humans could act decisively and intelligently under pressure. By the time the crisis was resolved, the city had survived without major damage, and the citizens looked at Elias with admiration. The resistant faction, though still cautious, could no longer dismiss him outright. Elias understood that trust would take time, but every action, every successful intervention, strengthened his position. He began to train select groups of Viridians in human methods of problem-solving, encouraging experimentation, creativity, and adaptability. The results were remarkable. Systems ran more efficiently, communication improved, and the population began to take pride in their accomplishments alongside him. Humans, he realized, were not just survivors, they were catalysts for growth and innovation. One evening, Elias stood atop a high tower, looking down at the city glowing under the twin moons of the planet. He reflected on his journey so far. The fear that had greeted him upon arrival was slowly transforming into respect. Children laughed as they practiced techniques he had taught them. Adults discussed strategies and improvements inspired by his ideas, and even some members of the resistant faction were beginning to see the value of collaboration. The city was changing, and humans were becoming a part of that change. Yet he knew that true acceptance would require more than deeds and solutions. It would require a demonstration of character, courage, and unwavering commitment to the well-being of the people. Elias resolved that he would continue to act not out of the desire for recognition, but out of the belief that humans could contribute something unique: intuition, creativity, and the ability to adapt in ways no one else could. The next challenge arrived in the form of a natural disaster, unlike any the city had faced before. A massive storm system, fueled by the planet's unique atmosphere, approached the city with unprecedented force. Winds tore through streets, energy systems surged dangerously, and the automated defense mechanisms began to fail. Panic swept through the population, and the resistant faction tried to seize control, arguing that humans should not interfere. Elias, however, acted without hesitation. He moved through the city, coordinating the response, guiding people to safety, and stabilizing critical systems. Using human ingenuity, he redirected energy, reinforced structures, and ensured that essential services continued to function. The storm raged through the night, but thanks to Elias's leadership, the city survived with minimal damage. When the sun rose, the Viridians looked at him with awe and gratitude. Even the resistant faction could not deny the value of his actions. Elias stood amidst the city, exhausted but resolute. The journey had been long, filled with challenges, fear, and resistance. Yet each step had proven one thing. Humans were not merely legends of the past, they were beings capable of courage, creativity, and innovation. He realized that his mission had grown beyond survival. He was not just a visitor from a distant time. He was a symbol of what humanity could achieve, even after 15,000 years. As the city began to recover, Elias felt a renewed sense of purpose. The resistant faction would continue to test him, and new challenges would arise. But he was ready. Humans, he understood, were defined not by fear or legend, but by their ability to adapt, to solve problems, and to inspire those around them. And in this city, on this distant planet, he was beginning to prove it. Elias knew that the true test of humanity's worth was still ahead. He would face challenges that required not just intelligence or courage, but the ability to inspire trust and cooperation. Yet he was confident. Humans had survived, thrived, and inspired civilizations across the galaxy. Here, too, they could make a difference, and Elias was ready to continue that mission, showing the Viridians that humans were allies, creators, and a force for hope and progress in the universe. Elias stood on the edge of the city, looking out across the sprawling towers and glowing streets. The Viridians had begun to accept him, but he knew that the final challenge was approaching. The resistant faction had not given up. Their whispers had grown louder, their subtle sabotage more frequent. They believed that humans were unpredictable and dangerous, and they were determined to prove it. Elias understood that this confrontation would test everything he had built: the trust of the people, the strength of his actions, and the power of human ingenuity. The city's central hub began to show signs of stress. Energy fluctuations became more frequent, and minor malfunctions escalated into serious problems. Elias immediately sensed that this was no accident. The resistant faction had secretly introduced errors into the system, hoping to create a crisis that would discredit him. He knew that if he failed to respond quickly, the entire city could face collapse, and the fragile trust he had earned would crumble. Elias took a deep breath, feeling the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders. Humans had survived for millennia through creativity, courage, and quick thinking. Now, he would need every bit of that skill to face this test. He entered the central hub, where a network of glowing conduits and control panels filled the room. The air hummed with energy, and alarms flashed across the walls. Viridians were working frantically, trying to manage the crisis, but the errors in the system were subtle, difficult to detect, and constantly changing. Elias moved calmly among them, observing patterns and analyzing the failures. His human intuition guided him, noticing small details that others overlooked. He quickly realized that the problems were deliberate, introduced by those who feared him. Elias began to organize a plan. He divided the Viridians into teams, assigning each group specific tasks based on their strengths. He combined their technology with his human problem-solving methods, creating a system of checks and redundancies that the resistant faction had not anticipated. Step by step, he traced the errors, corrected them, and stabilized the conduits. The Viridians followed his guidance with precision, learning from his approach. They began to see the value of human creativity combined with their technology, realizing that collaboration could achieve results far beyond what they had imagined. The resistant faction watched from the shadows, their plan unraveling. Elias had anticipated some of their tactics, but the sheer scale of their interference tested even his abilities. He worked tirelessly, analyzing every fluctuation and anticipating the consequences of each correction. Hours passed as he moved through the hub, his mind focused and alert. He guided the Viridians through complex procedures, solving problems that seemed impossible. With every success, the influence of the resistant faction weakened. Their whispers turned to confusion, and their subtle attacks were countered by Elias's foresight and adaptability. Finally, Elias reached the heart of the system, where the most critical errors had been introduced. The resistant faction had attempted to cause a massive energy surge that could have destroyed the central hub and caused chaos throughout the city. Elias studied the conduits, analyzing energy flows and identifying the source of the interference. He realized that he would need to create a new solution, one that combined Viridian technology with human ingenuity. He worked quickly, connecting circuits in a novel way, rerouting energy flows, and stabilizing the system. The conduits glowed brighter as the energy stabilized, and alarms gradually stopped. The city's systems returned to normal, and the threat was neutralized. The resistant faction could no longer hide, their plan had failed, and their influence was exposed. Elias looked around at the Viridians working alongside him, and he felt a surge of pride. Humans, he realized, were not only capable of survival, but of leadership, innovation, and inspiration. With the crisis averted, Elias addressed the Viridians. His voice was calm, steady, and full of confidence. Humans are not here to destroy. We are here to create, to solve problems, and to help. We act with courage and intelligence, and we learn from every challenge. Fear can only hold you back. Trust, cooperation, and understanding can move you forward. His words resonated through the hub, reaching every person present. For the first time, the resistant faction could not argue. The citizens had seen proof of his abilities, courage, and wisdom. In the following days, the city began to heal from the disruption. Systems were reinforced, infrastructure repaired, and the population began to regain a sense of normalcy. Elias continued to work among the people, teaching, guiding, and sharing his human methods. The Viridians began to adopt his techniques, integrating human creativity with their advanced technology. Small teams of humans and Viridians worked together on projects that improved the city, increased efficiency, and strengthened the bonds between them. Trust had become collaboration, and fear had been replaced by admiration. Elias also took the time to address the resistant faction directly. He sought them out, not with anger or confrontation, but with understanding and patience. He demonstrated the benefits of cooperation, showing them how human methods could enhance their technology, solve problems more efficiently, and create a stronger city. Slowly, some members began to see the value of his approach. They realized that humans were not unpredictable threats, but partners capable of extraordinary contributions. The resistance weakened, and the majority of the city now embraced his presence. Despite the progress, Elias knew that acceptance was only the beginning. Humans were not just visitors or helpers. They could be a guiding influence, shaping the future of this civilization. He began to work on larger projects, helping the Viridians develop new energy systems, improve transportation networks, and prepare for potential natural disasters. His human intuition and creativity allowed him to identify opportunities that the Viridians had overlooked. With each success, the city grew stronger, more resilient, and more unified. One evening, Elias stood on the tallest tower, overlooking the city as the sun set. The lights of the city glimmered like stars, and he could see the people moving through the streets, working, learning, and living. He thought about the time he had lost, 15,000 years, and the world he had awakened to, a world that had once feared him. Yet now, humans were not feared. They were respected, valued, and admired. Elias felt a deep sense of fulfillment. His mission was no longer just survival, it was transformation. He reflected on the lessons of the past weeks. Courage, creativity, and intelligence had earned the trust of the Viridians. Actions mattered more than words, and consistent efforts could change even the deepest fears. Humans, he realized, were not defined by legend or history, but by their ability to inspire, innovate, and lead. The people of this planet had learned this truth, and it would shape their society for generations to come. As the days passed, Elias continued to guide and teach. The Viridians began to see humans not as ancient myths or dangerous legends, but as partners, collaborators, and friends. Children played games inspired by human ingenuity. Engineers adopted his problem-solving techniques, and leaders incorporated human creativity into their planning. Fear had been replaced by respect, and curiosity had grown into admiration. Then came a celebration unlike any Elias had witnessed. The city's leaders, once cautious and skeptical, invited him to a ceremony honoring his contributions. The resistant faction, now a minority, could not prevent the recognition. Elias stood before the gathered Viridians, his heart full. Leaders spoke of his courage, his intelligence, and his ability to inspire. They acknowledged that humans, even one human, could change the world for the better. The crowd cheered, and children ran to him, their laughter filling the air. For the first time in 15,000 years, Elias felt the full warmth of acceptance. He spoke to the people, his voice carrying across the plaza. Humans have always sought to explore, to learn, and to help. We may be different, but we are not enemies. Together, we can build a stronger world, face challenges, and create a future filled with hope and possibility. Let fear be replaced by understanding, and let courage guide every step we take. His words were met with applause, nods, and smiles. The city had embraced him, and through him, humans were finally recognized not as legends of fear, but as symbols of hope and progress. In the weeks that followed, Elias continued his work, helping the city reach new heights. He developed partnerships between humans and Viridians, fostering collaboration that strengthened technology, education, and culture. The resistant faction had largely disappeared, unable to counter the evidence of humans' value. Trust had become respect, and respect had grown into admiration. The city thrived under the combined efforts of its people, guided in part by the ingenuity and courage of a human who had awoken after 15,000 years. Elias often thought about the vast span of time that had passed, the civilizations that had risen and fallen, and the opportunities that still lay ahead. Humans had survived for millennia not by luck, but through creativity, courage, and the ability to adapt. On this distant planet, he had proven that even one human could make a difference, reshape perception, and inspire a civilization. He felt a deep sense of fulfillment, knowing that humanity's legacy had been honored, not through conquest or legend, but through action, intelligence, and the courage to face fear with determination. As he watched the sun rise over the city one morning, Elias knew that his journey was far from over. There were still challenges ahead, new mysteries to explore, and new opportunities to demonstrate the value of humans. Yet he was confident. Humans were capable of great things, not because of power or technology, but because of their ability to think, create, and inspire. On this planet, they had proven themselves worthy, and through Elias, the Viridians had learned that humans could be trusted allies and partners in building a better future. Elias smiled, feeling the warmth of the sun on his face. The city below was alive, vibrant, and full of possibility. Fear had been replaced by hope, suspicion by trust, and legend by reality. Humans, after 15,000 years, had finally arrived, not as a threat, but as a beacon of courage, creativity, and intelligence. And Elias knew that this was only the beginning. The universe was vast, filled with opportunities and challenges, and humans would rise to meet them, leaving a mark not through fear, but through ingenuity, bravery, and the unwavering determination to make a difference. And so, Elias continued to walk among the people, teaching, learning, and inspiring. The city had changed, the resistant faction had been overcome, and the Viridians had embraced the human who had come from the past. Humans were no longer a legend of fear. They were a symbol of hope, a testament to courage, and a reminder that even after 15,000 years, one human could change the world. The story of Elias and the Viridians would be remembered for generations, a story of fear transformed into respect, of courage rewarded, and of humanity proven worthy once again.